The 2021 iPad Pro came out around April of this year, and quite honestly, has been on a roller coaster of love, with people loving the idea of the M1 being inside, along with a few new features, versus everyone else saying, and I quote, "My previous gen did the same thing, so there's no need to upgrade." Sure, I can definitely see both sides of the story since I myself am upgrading from my 2018 11-inch iPad Pro to this. However, at the end of the day, it boils down to whether I love it enough to keep it, or should I question my very existence as to the reason the Earth spins on an axis and why I bought the iPad Pro as a result of that. I know, confusing, right? That's how almost every other YouTuber made me feel personally after June 7th, 2021. Welcome back, everyone, to the Spacey Tropics Review channel, where we try to review just a little bit of everything. Let's get into my thoughts and feelings on if you already have the M1 iPad Pro, why it is that you should definitely keep it, versus questioning the very existence of aliens and Bigfoot, and why you bought the M1 iPad Pro, and why you should return it and join the "my old iPad does the same tricks" bandwagon. Let's get started. So first things first, like every other review or overview that I have done in the past, I'm going to quickly talk about the specs, or in this case, in order to give you guys more about the iPad Pro, somewhere behind me is going to be the actual specs of my personal 12.9-inch iPad Pro, and feel free to pause the video when it pops up now. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about this screen. The screen is phenomenal. It is awesome. I think this is probably going to be the best screen I have ever owned on a device, period, to date. Now, I know already some of you are going to question and ask, well, what are your thoughts about Bloomgate? I don't care about it. Does the 2021 M1 iPad Pro, the 12.9-inch model specifically with the mini LED display, suffer from blooming? Yes, it does. Will you ever see the blooming on a daily basis? No, you won't. Unless every single day without fail, you are raising the brightness up to maximum to view content, do something productive on it, etc. Only then will you be able to see the blooming, and only then will you be like, crap, this is a little bit too bright, don't you think? 1,000 nits of brightness? That's, You're never, well, I wouldn't say never, but you're not going to constantly put this thing up to full brightness. When you are viewing content, when you are creating things, when you are being productive on this M1 iPad Pro, the 12.9 inch specifically, you're not going to notice the blooming. I barely notice the blooming. All I know is I love the product, and it's great. And the screen portrays colors, like I said, as vividly as possible. The screen difference compared to my 2018 M1, here we go. Compared to my 2018 iPad Pro, the 11-inch, the screen difference is night and day. I can't tell you how much better it looks compared to something from roughly 3 years ago. It's pretty sweet. Something else I want to touch on is battery life. Personally, it's a little bit of a sore topic for me, only because the two main products, or portable products, I should say, that got the M1 treatment before the M1 iPad Pro. So that is the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro. Both of those have seen significant battery gains from what they previously used to offer. I think the M1 MacBook Pro gives you roughly about 20 hours, and the MacBook Air gives you roughly around 18, I think, 17, 18, one or the other. But those are significant battery gains, and those are full-fledged computers. I personally find it strange that the M1 iPad Pro can't even get a low power mode toggle like the iPhones in order to just, save the extra battery, because to be quite honest with you, this thing still has 10 hours of battery life, and that's weird to me, especially since it got M1, and those two saw significant battery gains. I would have at least expected this thing to go up to about minimum 12 hours. Minimum 12 hours. Now, I get it. There's a lot of things to take into consideration. The ProMotion display, the display itself because of the mini LEDs, every touch input and all these fancy jazz that goes on with this thing, because again, it is a touch product. Face ID, etc. I get it. There are things that can drain the battery significantly, but I also understand that M1 is supposed to help with that, right? So why isn't there 12 hours of battery life minimum? Beats me. Can't tell you. And if you have the Magic Keyboard like I do, that trickle drains the battery ever so slightly more when the backlight comes on. So you have all of that stuff to worry about. I think that is probably my only con with this device. Apple, you really need to work on that. At least give me a low power mode toggle. Let's also touch on cameras real quick right after that. Now, I know for a fact you are not stepping outside with your giant 13-inch tablet to take a picture of Mother Nature. In reality, you're taking your M1 iPad Pro to school. You're going to take it to school, and you are going to take pictures with this camera of the chicken scratch that's on the whiteboard or chalkboard of your classroom right before your teacher or professor or whoever erases everything from existence and you have nothing to refer to because you weren't fast enough to write the notes down. Ring a bell? Rings a bell for me. That's what you're going to be using this for, and that's what you're going to be thankful for having the LiDAR sensor on the back of this M1 iPad Pro as well. Now, I know it came on the 2020 iPad Pro, so kudos to you guys too. You guys got the, little hack right there, to take the pictures really fast, you know what I'm saying? But nonetheless, that's probably what you're going to be using your cameras for. So think about it like that next time you have to take a picture with your 13-inch tablet. Something that's a godsend for me on this brand new iPad Pro is the Thunderbolt port, thanks to M1. Yet again, M1, saving the day for me. On the previous iPad Pro from my 2018 model, the USB-C port on that was great, but it wasn't the best, to be quite honest with you. And why I say that is because nothing was plug and play, or at least nothing was immediately plug and play. Every time I try to plug in my MIDI keyboard, I have a 32-key MIDI keyboard that I use to interface with GarageBand, or interact, I should say, with GarageBand. And personally, it takes me so long to get that iPad connected with the keyboard. Like I tried plugging in the iPad to charge while I have this plugged in with a dongle to the iPad. I've tried, switching all toggles possible in order to get this thing to work. Unplug, plug in, unplug, plug in. Sometimes it's so bad I even forget the idea that I had, and I just forget about it for the rest of the night and go along my way. With the 2021 iPad Pro, I can say that has gone away. It is plug and play now. I plug in my MIDI keyboard and it immediately starts working, no questions asked. I personally love that. Something that reviewers have noted, however, other reviewers, bigger reviewers than me, is that they're having trouble, and take this as a joke, take this as however you want, but let's be real here. They're having trouble taking their 8K red monster footage, and they're having trouble, because it's on a 4 terabyte megalodon SSD, external SSD that was made with materials from Mars, and they can't export it, faster than 30 seconds. Are we really going to be upset about 30 seconds? Are we really going to be upset about 5 minutes? If it's a large file, are we really upset about 5 minutes? Your file is 16 gigs, my guy. 16 gigs, not 16 megs, 16 gigs. I can go on a whole rant about that. But reviewers are saying that that's the problem. And okay, I guess I can kind of see the frustration, only because Apple promised that this Thunderbolt port on the M1 iPad Pro is going to give us significant gains and, transfer speeds between SSDs and stuff like that. And I guess I can kind of feel their pain. But in reality, let's be real here. You're not taking fancy, crazy footage off of a CFast card and putting it onto an iPad Pro. No, you're not. You're putting that onto a computer where you can color grade and do all the fancy stuff that you need to do. On this M1 iPad Pro, or on any iPad Pro, or any iPad for that matter, you're going to be using a flash drive. You're going to be using a 64 gig flash drive. You're going to be using a basic SD card, even a micro SD card with a dongle, and just transferring stuff that way. And to be quite honest with you, I think this iPad Pro is more than capable of handling that. If you think otherwise, be my guest. You can go in the comment section below and tell me otherwise. But personally, again, it's It's okay. It's decent footage as long as it's not gigs upon gigs upon gigs worth of stuff. Then yeah, you can handle it on here. It'll be no sweat. Look, personally, the main reason why I think you should keep this M1 iPad Pro is solely because of M1, is solely because of the chipset. Now, let's be real here. In Apple fashion, Apple likes to be late to the party, fashionably late, whatever you want to call it, every single time. Okay? Raise your virtual hand, aka hit that like button, if you have listened to every leaker, reviewer, well, big YouTuber, news media outlet, etc., and felt that we were gonna get Logic, we were gonna get Xcode, we were gonna get Final Cut on the M1 iPad Pro at WWDC this year. It's gonna be practically most of you, if not all of you, because I myself am one of those people that was happily tricked into thinking that we were gonna get all these apps on the iPad Pro. Look, I get it. Apple doesn't want to put some of their best applications on a product that is so good where it's at right now that it could possibly diminish even their MacBook sales. Okay? Let's be real here. That's probably the reason why. But I can also see the reason why that they would bring it eventually, or they would bring something of this caliber to the M1 iPad Pro eventually. I mean, for now, we have LumaFusion to take the place of Final Cut, and I know LumaFusion is getting great updates. We have, and please don't rip me apart for this, I know you don't like it. I kind of like it just because it's easy to use and it's easy for me to make stuff. But we still have GarageBand. We still have other music creating apps on the App Store that allow us to do things instead of, having Logic, for example. As for Xcode, I have no idea about coding on an iPad or if there are any coding apps besides Swift, I think it is, that Apple makes. That really doesn't affect me, but I know people aren't going to be coding on an M1 iPad Pro. Okay, let's be real here. Personally, for me, I say trust the developers. The developers know what they're doing. The developers are the ones that are going to give us the ultimate app or application that we could use on the M1 iPad Pro in due time. Again, let's be real here, folks. This thing came out this year. It hasn't even had a full year yet of being in the marketplace. Give it some time. Relax. It's not that serious that we need something today. Long story short, keep your M1 iPad Pro. I can't say it enough. I love this device. I think it's great. And yeah, I get it that it does everything that my 2018 used to do. But eventually, in due time, things will come specific for the M1 in typical Apple fashion. And when you don't have an M1, well, let the complaints fly again. But nonetheless, if you do have an M1, if you have kept your M1, kudos to you. You get to get the new features first, my guy. And remember, it's your money at the end of the day. You can listen to me all you want, and you can listen to some of the biggest reviewers on YouTube possible. But it's your money at the end of the day. It's how you want to spend it and how you want to go about purchasing products or keeping your older iPad Pro and holding off until actual things for M1 and that could utilize M1 come out. This is part 1 of a 3-part mini-series that I'm doing specifically about the M1 iPad Pro. The next part about this is going to be college use and what I think specifically should you use this device for, as a main device, a companion device, who knows? We'll see you in that second video. In the meantime, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate you guys so much for building this community. We've crossed 1,200 subs. We're on our way to 1,300 now. I couldn't be any more happier that this channel is continuing to grow, and I have you guys to thank for it. With that being said, I'll catch you guys in the second part of this iPad mini series. See you in the next one.